Hello, my name is Monica Kammerduur. This video is the recording of a PUM remote advice coaching for the Kousba municipality in northern Lebanon. The topic is vermicomposting for small farmers in order for them to use the organic waste of their farms for the benefit of their soil. The coaching consists of weekly video conferences in August and September 2024. This is part 5, stabilizing compost in an aerobic process using a vermiculture in a pile bin. Add the worms on top of the pile. When the thermophilic phase is finished, we did this in part 3, you wait until the pile temperature has dropped and stays below 27 degrees Celsius. Next, you check at 5 to 20 centimeters below the surface the aeration, humidity and temperature. If necessary, you adjust this aeration with an auger and the humidity by spraying. Next, you spread at least 200 grams of active adult worms. You can see that because they are no longer white if they are over 2 months old, and if they are more than 1 year, they are very big. Just ordinary worms, and they will work themselves down in. A word about vermiculture starter additives, because if you look on the internet, you see a lot of videos where people add starter mixes or mixed starter additives on top of in the brown layer to help the vermiculture process. I have seen unsulfured molasses liquid and diluted, kelp meal in powder or liquid, alfalfa powder, azomite powder, glaucomite powder, or gypsum XL or lava powder. And I raised the question, are any of these starter additives necessary? My answer is probably not. Of course, all these additives can be supportive if used in small quantities, but I wonder why spending money on these additives if you do not need them. So my suggestion is that first you do without, and only if you're convinced that you need any of them, then you could purchase them. Okay. After about 15 to 30 minutes, you check. No worms should be visible at the top anymore. They should have worked themselves in. If there are still on the top and they are inactive, they're not trying to move in, then remove them because they are either ill or dead. Next, dig your hand with your hand in the pile and observe the worm health. The distribution and activity of the worms, check if there is a lack of activity, check if they have any odd behavior of any other kind. If that is the case, which I very much doubt, but in any way, if that is the case, please remove your worms as soon as possible, because then there is something very wrong with the pile. A poison may be in it or whatever. Okay, after 3 days, you do another health check. This is usually the time that you need to spray them anyway. And again, you look, no worms should be visible at the top. And if there are, they should be on their way working themselves in, because if they are inactive, they are either ill or dead, and you might as well remove them. At 5 to 20 centimeters below the surface, you check the aeration, humidity and temperature, and then you dig with your hand a bit deeper in the pile and you do the health check again. The distribution, the activity, and if there is any odd behavior. Again, I don't expect so, but just to be sure, have a check. In the time to come, you continue to check your compost temperature regularly. You measure uh, at least once a month. Also, you continue to spray water every 3 days. Originally, you started with 4.5 to 5 liters. Maybe you have to adjust the amounts. Check that you spray it evenly over the top of the materials and cover up again. You may want to adjust depending on temperatures, rain, draft, or whatever. And if you're in doubt, stir up with an auger, check the moist and check the presence of active worms, and check the temperature also the day after the intervention. Okay, after 1 month, you do again health check, just the same as you did after 3 days. So you check just below the surface, aeration, humidity, and temperature. And some deeper down, you dig with your hand and you see if everything goes well. The distribution of the worms, they should not have decreased in numbers. And maybe on a healthy pile, there are already eggs or cocoons present. Of course, again, you check for activity, odd behavior, or wounds, or disformed morphology, or something like that. All these things I do not expect, but just to be sure, check it. The same you do after about 2 months. And this time you want to find already abundant numbers of eggs and cocoons. And maybe there are even already young worms present. If not, maybe you want to add some worms on the pile, because then when the distribution is not well enough, they may not find each other for mating. But that's the only problem I can think of. But just to be sure, you do your health check again, activity, odd behavior, or wounds or disformation. You keep on checking this every month. It only will take a few minutes. So at -5 to 20 centimeters, you check for aeration, humidity, and temperature. You dig with your hand and you do the health check. And of course, the numbers should increase and definitely not decrease. And you will still see eggs and cocoons and new young worms being present. Don't forget to keep making notes in your records book. For the first pile, so you already recorded the date you started to make the pile, the content of the pile in original materials, everything about the thermophilic phase, the dates and the temperatures. So now for this pile, you add the date of the first edition of the worms, and the amount of worms, of course, and the dates of spraying water, the dates of the health check, the specifications of your observations, and if you did any interferences, don't forget to note the identified problems and the solutions. And of course, you do the same for the next pile and all the piles that you have. After about 9 to 12 months, you do the final health check, or at least you hope that is the final health check. Probably you will need the compost. So you remove the cover, you open the side, and then you check the reduction and the quality. Here you have the sides open. You've removed some nails. You can well see how the pile looks after 9 to 12 months. And now you Do your observations. Are you happy with the compost quality? Is it ready? Well, so you wonder, has the pile reduced to less than 20% of the volume? In this case, no. It's about 40% of the original volume. Is the color of the compost nice and black? Well, the color is nice, but it's definitely not black, it's brown. How does it appear in terms of moisture? Well, from the outside, it does not appear very moist in this case. And what do you think about the texture? And on the outside, there are many untouched carbon particles. So I would say, due to probably draft, the outside of this pile had been too dry. Anyway, let's check further. Dig down with your hand into the compost pile and do further observations from the inside. Okay, are you happy with how the worms are doing? Well, have they been active? Yes, they have been active, but not on the outside because many brown materials are left over. Are they present in abundant numbers? And how deep under the surface? Well, you find them present deeper down where it's nice and moist. And do you see many worm eggs and young worms? Yes, we find eggs and young worms, so they have been active, but as we saw previously, on the outer part it has been too dry, unfortunately. Discuss your observations with your peers. You want to learn from it, so learn from your colleagues. And draw your conclusions. If you're not completely happy with the results, like in this case, you can sew up the side of the pile again and adjust the pile. You can steer and break up anaerobic spots or sieve out some big clotted materials. You can add more chopped brown materials or add some kelp or lava meal if you think you need to adjust the acidity or the nutrients. You can adjust the moisture situation or improve the ventilation from the bottom, or you can make other adjustments, and you can add a handful of new worms on top and cover up again. And then you can allow the vermicomposting to restart or to continue. Do not add any fresh green materials or fresh manure, because then you risk that thermophilic microbes might take over again and the pile will heat up. That might be good for the hygiene, but that might not be good for the worms already there because they are not heat resistant. So you do not want that. And of course, you keep on making notes in your records book. I already discussed all the notes that you have made. In this case, because you're not happy with the pile, you note about the results, your conclusions and your adjustments, and we see them next. And you do the same with the other piles. However, if you are happy and the pile is ready to harvest, like it is over here, you remove the layer by layer and collect the worms as you see them. There are many methods, but one of a convenient method is something like this. You stop watering the pile for a few days before, and the worms will move down to where it's a bit more moist. So you gently remove the top layer of the compost from the pile and put it in the sieve until you start seeing the worms. You collect the worms as far as you can see them. The worms in the compost pile will move away from you, away from the light, so down towards the bottom of the pile. Let them go. Just gently dig down and remove more compost from the pile. Put this compost on the sieve and work down slowly at the bottom, and at the bottom you collect most of the remaining compost and worms. Remaining compost, you put it on the sieve, and the rest of the worms, the ones you've missed, you can retrieve from the sieve. So here somebody has been busy, so you cannot see the worms. The worms are in the bucket on the right side, and the material you collected to put on the sieve are in the bucket on the left side. Okay, sieve and harvest the compost. There are two types. One is a flat sieve. Here you can see a flat sieve that is maneuvered by hand. You can find examples all over the internet, and you can make them yourself. You just add a rope to every corner, and you hang it somewhere, and then you can easily move the sieve. And the remainings on the sieve and the residues you can use on the worms you can collect, and the residues you can use on the next pile. Another way of sieving, it's just an alternative, is a tumbling sieve. There are electric ones, but here I have some photos from the Netherlands, and the gentleman on the left is doing it with bicycle pedals. As you know, we are very fond of bicycles. So his tumbler he made of bicycle wheels, and he is pedaling his tumbler around. And also here it is easy to collect any remaining worms. What this gentleman is doing on the right is sieving it further with an extra fine tumbling sieve to get the finest vermicompost. Of course, he can only do this after the removal of the worms and the larger parts. So the big residues you put in the next pile. And just a note on this exercise, this is not the way to harvest cocoons. I understood that I should make a presentation for small farmers who are actually interested in improving their soils. They are not interested in commercializing their worm harvest. So they are not interested very much in egg production and cocoon production, because that will happen in the pile, but then the worms will hatch, and by the time the pile is finished, there are not that much eggs and cocoons left anymore. Anyway, if you're interested is also in collecting cocoons and making a commercial activity out of eggs and cocoons and producing worms for sale, then I would advise you produce in a very different system, like for example shallow trays. But I would say that system is not about using organic waste. The aim of that system is intensive worm farming. It's a different concept of production. I have put a reference down if you are interested in this. Okay, back to our vermicompost when it's ready. When it's ready, you allow it to dry a bit before using or storing to about 50% moist. The consistency should be loose so you can disperse it easily. You can store it in bags for a few weeks or months, but when it gets older and dries out, the quality will reduce. In this chapter, I will not discuss the applications. I do that later in part 8. Okay, just for your comfort, because I am doing this presentation, I cannot come over to you and I have barely any idea the production circumstances. So all I can say is failure is only bad if you do not learn but give up. Don't expect that following my advice will lead you to fantastic results without any problems. And so if you run into any problems, please watch this video for comfort. Mr. Jay Young is talking about his trial and errors in vermicomposting on his farm. Anyway, summary and conclusions. Thermophilic and consecutive vermicomposting in an aerated round pile bin has serious labor-saving advantages at the start of the process. Monthly health checks of the pile and the worms are very important throughout the vermicomposting period. Results depend on the initial composition of the pile, brown and green materials, and nice layers. The applied discipline in spraying water to keep the whole pile moist at about 70%. That means that if you take the material and you squeeze it in your hand, then there should be barely coming a water drop out, but not really be dripping. You want to protect against climatic and weather influences. As you've seen today, I've shown you a compost pile. It was not ready because it was too much influenced by wind draft on the outside. And of course, also the success depends on your interferences based on observations, because the pile that I showed you was left alone for several months and was not observed regularly, and that's how they ended up like this. Okay, so success is rewarding but not guaranteed, so don't forget to make notes in a records book so you can learn from what you did. And again, I organize a peer group of people who are doing the same thing to discuss your activities in the process. This was rather a long video. If you have any questions, please send me an email and we come back to it next week when I continue my presentations. Thank you very much.